Hello and Assalamu alaikum everyone. I am Jumaira Antas, and in this video we will try to analyze a literary piece, The Necklace by Guy de Maupassant, through the lens of Marxist criticism. But before we proceed to the literary analysis, let's have first a very quick recapitulation of Marxist criticism.
So what is this Marxist criticism? Marxist criticism is a type of literary analysis that is based on the theories of Karl Marx. It focuses on the conflict between social classes and the way in which literature reflects, reinforce, or challenge economic and social inequalities. According to Marxist critics, every society is divided into different classes, usually the wealth or ruling class or the bourgeoisie, and the working class or the proletariat. Now, in literature, Marxist criticism looks at how power, money, and social class affect the characters, their relationships, and the events in the story. It also examines how the economic system shapes human behavior and how it can create inequality, alienation, and injustice.
Now, the question is, how do we analyze using Marxist lens?
When we analyze or criticize a literary work using the Marxist lens, we consider the following steps. First, we identify class relations. Here, we examine how different classes are represented in the text and the dynamics between them, following with the analysis of economic context. We look at the socio-economic conditions during the time of the text creation and how they influence. Next is we explore ideological function. We investigate how the text reflects or challenges dominant ideology. Does it reinforce capitalist values or does it critique them? Next is we consider authorial intent. We reflect on the author's background and belief to understand their perspective on class and society, following with the examination of language and the symbols and the myths. We analyze how language and symbols in the text convey class struggle and ideologies. Now that we have the quick recapitulation of the Marxist criticism, let's move on to our literary piece. So let's have first the author's background and the summary of the story for us to be guided and follow the criticism. So The Necklace was written by Guy de Maupassant. He is a French writer known for his short stories. He lived during the 19th century at a time when social class and economic status played a huge role in people's lives. Maupassant often wrote about everyday people and their struggles, exposing the harsh realities behind the appearances and how society treated individuals based on wealth and status. Now, let me give you a very short summary of The Necklace, or The Necklace. The story follows a woman named Mathilde Louisel who dreams of living a luxurious life even though she was born into a modest, middle-class family. She marries a simple clerk and lives an ordinary life, but she constantly feels that she deserves more wealth, more beauty, more admiration. One day, her husband brings home an invitation to a grand party. She was excited but anxious. Mathilde borrows a beautiful necklace from her wealthy friend, Madame Forestier. At the party, she shines and enjoys the attention she always wanted. However, after the event, she discovers the necklace is missing. Instead of telling the truth, she and her husband buy a replacement necklace and spend the next 10 years working extremely hard to pay off the debt. They live in poverty, doing heavy labor. They lived in poverty, doing heavy labor and suffering greatly. After all those years, Mathilde finds out that the original necklace was fake, just costume jewelry. The piece shows situational irony when Mathilde appears to be a luxurious individual, when in fact she belonged to middle class, which people in upper class criticized. All in all, this powerful twist at the end reveals the cruel and it shows how appearances, pride, and social pressure can destroy lives.
Now let's have the Marxist analysis of the necklace.
First, let's identify the class relations. In the necklace, there's a clear distinction between the lower middle class, represented by Matilda and her husband, and the upper class, represented by Madame Forrester and the guests at the ball. Matilda belongs to the court of the upper class, even though she comes from the modest background. Her dissatisfaction with her social position highlights the class divide. She feels trapped, envious, and ashamed of her poverty. Her husband, who is a clerk, is content with a very simple life, but Matilda constantly dreams of luxury and wealth. The dynamic between her and Madame Forrester also shows a kind of power imbalance. Even though Madame Forrester is kind, her ability to lend expensive-looking jewelry without concern reveals her privilege. Now let's try to analyze the economic context. The writer Guy de Maupassant wrote this story in the late 19th century. It was the time when social mobility was limited and the gap between the rich and the poor was really a big concern to everyone. And even though middle-class people worked hard, they still struggled to get recognition or status. This economic context deeply influences Matilda's action. She believes that rich, even just for a night, will give her value into society. And that hardship that Matilda and her husband endured for 10 years to repay a necklace that they think is expensive represents the brutal impact of a capitalist system where appearances and possessions define your worth. Now let's try to explore the ideological functions. So the story both critiques and reflects dominant capitalist ideologies. On one hand, it shows how the desire for wealth and status, typical capitalist values, lead to Matilda's downfall. Her obsession with material things causes her to lose the little comfort that she had as a middle-class woman. So the story suggests that chasing luxury and social status is dangerous and foolish. However, the story also reflects how deeply these values are ingrained in society. Matilda's worth in her eyes and others is tied to how she looks and what she owns. That shows how ideology works. People come to believe and accept the system, even when it harms them. Now let's try to see the authorial intent in this story. So based on our research, the writer of the story, Guy de Maupassant, came from a middle-class background and often wrote about the struggles of ordinary people. He had a critical view of society and its obsession with class and appearances. So through this story, the necklace, Maupassant likely wanted to expose the emptiness of social climbing and the cruelty of a system that values image over reality. So his tone is ironic, especially with the twist ending, which emphasizes the tragedy of Matilda's value. Given that, let's proceed to the fifth step in analyzing literary piece through Marxist criticism. Let's examine the language and symbolism in there. So the story, the necklace itself, is a powerful symbol. It represents wealth, beauty, and social status, all the things Matilda desires. But in the end, it reveals to be fake, symbolizing the illusion of materialism and the false promises of social mobility. Maupassant's language often contrasts luxury with poverty, describing the Matilda's daydream with rich, elegant words and her real life with dull, simple truths. This contrast reinforced the gap between her dreams and her reality.
To conclude this, through Marxist lens, the necklace is not just the story about lost piece of jewelry. It's a powerful critique of class struggle, materialism, and the harsh economic realities of the time. It reveals how capitalist values can trap people in a cycle of poverty and illusion, and how the desire to appear wealthy can cost more than it's worth. And that's all in this video. Thank you so much for watching.